last time we talked about applications of sacred geometry. The way to use these liberal arts, the quadrivium, the trivium from the ancient world, is to apply every limb of them to understanding yourself and yourself in relation to the cosmos. It's quite different from what we're used to in today's education system. We learn our literacy and numeracy, and it's all applied to stuff out there, and so many young people and not so young people feel that there may be very little relevance between what they learn at school and what their jobs require of them later in life. But when you study the basic limbs of the trivium and the quadrivium, literacy and numeracy, in the way that they were intended to be studied philosophically, as applying to oneself and one's relationship to the cosmos, then it becomes very interesting, very engaging, and one doesn't question the wisdom of such a curriculum, because one is experiencing the benefits all the way along. We finished, sorry Belinda.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
We were talking about the pyramid and how the pyramid gives us our symbol of solidity, because it takes the triangle, which was our symbol of two-dimensional space, and it builds it into a three-dimensional object with a square base, triangular faces, four triangular faces, with edges all meeting at a point. And we mentioned that the pyramid therefore represents every thing, every entity that we see around us. We also mentioned that it recapitulates this sequence of numbers: the monad, the duad, the triad, and the tetrad. And when you sum them, you get the decad, which is the tenfold structure of the emanated manifest universe. That tenfold structure, it can be easily observed if you go to a 10-pin bowling alley. It's the way the 10 pins are arranged. One at the front, and two behind, three behind that, and four in the final row. And that essentially is the layout of a famous symbol of Pythagoras, called the tetractys. We touched on that. And it's also the basis of the tree of life, the tree of the Sephiroth, that the Kabbalists use. 10 steps to manifestation. We mentioned that not only was the transcendental number pi encoded into the structure of the pyramid, and it relates, the pyramid is a scaled down version of the hemisphere of the earth. So whenever you're relating radii and straight lengths to circular distances, perimeters, circumferences, pi is brought into the equation. And in fact, pi has a meaning to meditate on too. Pi is not simply a number we use in calculations. Remember, I said at the outset, in order to get back to the philosophical well springs of education, we need to find the quantitative in the qualitative, and we need to find the qualitative in the quantitative. So rather than just treating pi as a quantity, 3.15, etc., we see it as a symbol that relates to the structure of being. Because if pi is the ratio between the diameter and the circumference of any circle, well, it is what ties together and unifies the point, the infinitesimal point which has become the center of this circle, the point that has a position but no dimension, no extension well, the dimension means a measuring in two ways. So as soon as you draw out a diameter from that point, you have the extended line with a polarity. And the circumference can be out as wide as you want it to be. There's no limit. It could be as close as you want or as wide as you want. But it consists of an infinitude of points. The center is one point, like the subject of consciousness, singular. But the circumference is unlimited, infinite points, like the objects of consciousness. The circle therefore ties the one to the many in a unified relationship. And pi is the mysterious, somewhat secret connection that explains the unified relationship between the infinitesimal, the point, the center, and the infinite, the periphery. And as soon as you close the circle, you have a bounded cosmos. And that's what consciousness is. Whether we're talking about the primitive consciousness of a cell, or my consciousness, a human consciousness, or maybe a consciousness that is beyond the human, it is nevertheless a closed circle. And it brings the infinite in relation to the infinitesimal. These are the two bounds of the cosmos. The unlimitedly large and the unlimitedly small. It bounds the cosmos, it makes it finite. So there are two ends to what is not finite, what is undefined, what is infinite. One end, one pole, is the dwindling, minuscule, indefinitely small, called the infinitesimal. It might be a name that you might remember if you did calculus in high school. To try and get to that tangent, that single point on a curve, you're shrinking the distance to something that is on the threshold of manifestation. It's there and it's not there. And then at the other pole of the cosmos is the infinitely large. And until you put that circumference around it, it's not bound. And so this is the relationship between macrocosm and microcosm, two poles of the cosmos. And so a contemplation of pi can lead you into that kind of contemplation, which is properly philosophical. Now, I said that there was another transcendental number built into the pyramid structure, and that was phi. These are Greek letters, of course. Pi, which we normally spell or transliterate into English as PI. It's got its own Greek letter. And then phi, which we normally transliterate as PHI, which is related to the Fibonacci sequence and the golden section and so on. What does all that mean? It's worth, I think, pondering phi for a little bit. Taking it back to the pyramid, I said that the ratio between the length of an edge and half the length of the base of the pyramid is phi. So it's encoded in there just as pi is. It's encoded in other places too. We know that a rectangle that's based on the golden proportion seems to be the most aesthetically pleasing to the eye. So the Greeks built their temples on this ratio. It's clearly visible in the Parthenon on the Acropolis, for example. But in doing so, in basing architectural proportions upon the golden section, they are just copying nature. It's one example of mimesis, imitation in the fine arts. What do I mean copying nature? Phi is present in lots of things in nature, like the nautilus shell and the dispersion of seeds on a sunflower head. It's even present in the oscillations of financial markets in terms of the ratio of the retracement of the highs and the lows that you can see in charts. And it's most visibly present in the human body. Remember, I said that 5 was very much a human number. We had the 5 senses, and then we had the 3 limbs of the trivium and the 4 limbs of the quadrivium to give us that right-angled triangle with the hypotenuse to process the information from the 5 senses. If we look at the distance from, say, the crown of my head to my navel and relate that to the distance from my navel to the floor, your crown, your navel, your floor, it's all the same. The human body is, it exhibits the golden proportion. Because if the whole body has a height of, say, 1, then the larger part of that section, from the belly button down, has a ratio of 0.618. That's approximately phi. But phi replicates itself. So it's not only present in the overall division of the body between the crown and the navel and the floor. The Renaissance artists were very familiar with this. You can also see it in the head, because from the crown to the eyes, to the level of the brow here, that ratio compared to the rest of the face is in the golden ratio. It's present in the hands as well. Remember, we have 5 digits on our hand, and the ratio between the finger and the distance, the palm, is in the golden ratio. But even if you go in with X-ray vision and look at the skeleton of the hand is made up of 3 finger bones called phalanges. The ratio of the top one to the second one is in the golden ratio. The ratio of the second one to the third one is in the golden ratio. And the ratio of the third one to the metatarsal bone that comes to join the wrist bones is in the golden ratio. What's this golden ratio? Here's another way to look at it. Like, if you have a line, how can you cut that line such that there'll be a larger part and a shorter part? But the ratio of the short part to the large part is the same as the ratio of the large part to the whole line. I'll say that again. You want to cut a line in such a way, and there's only one cut that can do it, such that the ratio of the shorter section of the line to the larger section is the same as the ratio of the larger section to the whole length. That ratio gives you your golden section. And we know that it can be derived from the 5 as well. Because if you draw a perfect 5-pointed star and then join the points, you have a regular pentagon, a 5-sided figure. If you look at the ratio of one side of the pentagon to one length of the pentacle, the 5-pointed star, you've got your golden section. The length on the 5-pointed star, just one of those lengths, will be about 1.618 times longer than one side of the pentagon that frames the 5-pointed star. So that's another way of getting phi. The human number of 5 is closely related to the macroscopic number of 6. There's an equation, 6 over 5 times phi squared is very close to pi. Now, what am I getting at here? We can go back to pi in a minute and show where sixness and hexatic geometry based on the hexagram comes from. But I would just say that the phi spiral is found in nature because it is built on a Fibonacci sequence. And I mentioned that the seed arrangement on the head of a sunflower is based on this transcendental number. And it's really interesting because when you have seeds, you have new life and the power to replicate. Self-replication is the sign of life. It's the signature of life. So there is something about the number 5 and the transcendental number phi which has to do with regeneration, replication, life propagating itself, budding off ever new versions of itself. Because if you take that ratio, 1 to 1.618, and you bend it around a circle, you'll get an angle of 137.5 degrees. That arc will be the smaller, will correspond to the smaller section of your original line, and the bigger arc, completing the 360 degrees, corresponds to the larger section of the original line. Now, if you went around this circle and you just spat out a seed at 137.5 degrees, and you went another 137.5 and spat out another seed, and you kept doing that over and over and over again, you would get the seed arrangement on the head of a sunflower. It's all coded into nature. And so when you study arithmetic in the quadrivium, you are in a sense imitating nature, but you're finding that the creative patterns have all been laid down in nature. And the same patterns, the same meaning, logos, is there in nature, and it's in the human mind as well. To get the phi spiral, you have to build it up with Fibonacci numbers. Now, Fibonacci numbers are a sequence, the ratio of two consecutive terms of which converge on phi. They get closer and closer to 1.618. Remember, it's not 1.618. It goes on forever in its decimal expansion, like pi. It's a transcendental number. So if you look at this sequence, which is usually attributed to Leonardo da Fibonacci from the Middle Ages, he was explaining how rabbits breed and how things can regenerate and multiply in nature. Start from 0, add 1. It's like putting one rabbit in the hutch. Add another one. Put two rabbits together if they can mate. Then if you add 1 plus 1, you get the next term, which is 2. So if you like, beginning with the 0, a 0 plus 1 is 1. That's your third term. 1 plus 1 is 2. That's your next term. 2 plus 1 is 3. That's your next term. 3 plus 2 is 5. That's your next term. 5 plus 3 is 8. That's your next term. 8 plus 5 gives you 13. 13 and 8, 21. 21 and 13, 34. Now the ratio between 34 and 21 is pretty close to 1.618. You know, it gets closer and closer. When we're looking at the ratio between, say, 8 and 5, it's like 1.6. It's getting there, it's on the way there. And the further you take out this sequence, the closer the conversion gets. So obviously the Fibonacci sequence is intimately tied up with this transcendental number, phi, the golden section, the golden proportion. Which does link arithmetic and the arts as well, because it just happens to be the most pleasing proportion for the human eye to look at. You can see it in a window frame, you can see it in a face, you can see it in the human body.
That's why artists use maths.
That's right.
They divide everything up on the canvases before they start.
And some artists use maths more than others. In the Renaissance, they did this a lot because there was a revival of Hermetic learning. One painting that you can go and view to see this demonstrated brilliantly is by Piera della Francesca, who did a painting called The Baptism of Christ. And it's all based on the golden proportion.
Wow.
The body, the positioning of the trees in the frame, the dove above, like how much space at the top of the painting, how much space below the painting, and so on. Because he believed that not just music was numbers put into application, but the visual arts were also numerically based. So we were talking about the Fibonacci sequence. Now, there's a lot that mathematicians do with the Fibonacci sequence, and one of them is to construct squares and then rectangles on these Fibonacci ratios. And when you join points in these squares and rectangles and you keep going on and making bigger squares 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on, and then connect the points, you end up with a spiral. The phi spiral. And as I say, it's present in nature on nautilus shells, conchs, and in many places it's even present in our macro structures, like the galaxies. The Milky Way galaxy, if viewed from above, is a phi spiral. Why is it built into nature? There's something else that's not often known, but there's hidden mysteries of time connected with phi. We just accept the breakdown of time as it has come down to us from the Babylonians and so on. You know, there's 60 seconds in an hour, and there are 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day, and so on. Well, if you take this Fibonacci sequence and you started with 0 and then 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, and you placed these numerals around the circumference of a circle, but every time you got to a double digit, the first double digit would be 13 in this sequence, correct? You want to reduce it to a single digit. So you take the 1 and the 3 and add them, and you produce a 4. So instead of 13 on this circumference, write 4. And then the next Fibonacci number, 21, you would reduce to 2 plus 1 equals 3. You'd write 3 there. And the next one, 34, reduce that to 7. So what you've got is single digits. Now, the interesting thing is that this sequence repeats itself after 24 terms. So after 24 terms, the 25th term becomes 0, and the 26th term becomes 1, and then 1 and 2, 3, and so it goes around again. So there's something bound and finite there. And the number 24 beautifully divides this circle into a clock face, the 24 hours of the day. There's a mystery of time encoded in phi. Now, where does the 60 come from? Well, if you just look at your Fibonacci sequence and just take the last digit. For example, 144 is a Fibonacci number. It's the addition of 89 and 55, those two terms. Instead of writing 144, just write the last digit that appears in the number, which in this case would be 4. And Fibonacci numbers grow very fast, so there'll be many, many digits. They'll be in the millions and so on. And just take the last digit and start listing them. There comes a point where this whole sequence repeats itself. You know what that point is? 60 terms. So after 60 terms, it goes back to 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 3 for 13, 1 for 21. And so here is your clock face divided into 60 parts. It gives you the minutes and the seconds. And of course, the other exercise that we just did gives you the 24-fold division of the day. the hours of the day. And so while pi is very much concerned with the mysteries of space, squaring the circle and all of that, phi has buried in it the mysteries of time. And we know space-time is a continuum. And I've used in previous videos other words like being and identity. And identity actually means same entity. Because the thing that we see is the same entity from different perspectives, whether it be a tree or a stone, something in our environment. Now, identity focuses on that differentiated item. It is the discrete side, the discrete aspect of which the continuous aspect is being. So being and identity are one, but when we identify entities around us as individual beings, that's called identity. Being isn't simply the sum total of all of those, it's just not a collection of individual entities. It's the continuum aspect of it. So we have a space-time continuum. Any questions? It's a bit of a digression, but some of you will find it interesting, and I wanted to give a clear demonstration that there is a way of approaching literacy and numeracy through their own...
That's relevant to yourself as well.
That leads to self-knowledge,
yeah.
self-realization, and understanding your relationship to the cosmos.
It's the first time I've seen it put that way.
All right, we'll leave it at there for now.